Have you ever stopped to wonder what comes after a life of work, family, and all our worldly duties? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty radical roadmap for the later stages of life. It's drawn from an ancient Vedic text, and it's this profound guide that points toward one very specific ultimate goal: spiritual liberation.
You know, it's one of those huge questions that people have been asking forever. We build careers, we raise families, we collect all these experiences. But is there something more? Is all of this leading somewhere?
So the thing about the ancient text we're exploring today is that it doesn't just ask the question. It lays out a direct, step-by-step path to the answer. It's a journey of really deep detachment and intense focus, all designed to help a person reach their ultimate potential.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this journey down. We're looking at 4 key stages. First up is leaving the world behind, that strategic withdrawal from everyday life. Then we get into the path of total renunciation. After that, we'll explore the unique mindset of a person who's actually free. And finally, we'll look at the ultimate destination this whole path leads to.
So, the journey kicks off with what's called the vanaprastha stage. This is for someone entering that third phase of life. After you've fulfilled your worldly duties, you can choose to place your spouse in your son's care or even take her with you, and then you retreat to the forest to live a life of peace and focus.
What's so wild is just how specific the instructions are. I mean, the lifestyle is stripped down to the absolute bare essentials. Your food comes from the forest, your clothes are made from nature, you even give up personal grooming. The goal here is crystal clear. You have to detach from physical comfort and any need for what other people think. And hold on, because the discipline gets even more intense. To build an unbreakable will and really master your senses, the text lays out 3 core austerities, known as tapas. In the summer, you're enduring the heat of 4 fires around you, plus the sun above. In the rainy season, you're just standing in the downpour, no shelter. And in winter, you're submerged in cold water. Now, this isn't self-punishment, it's more like a really intense form of spiritual conditioning.
So here's the crucial point, right? It's all about the purpose behind this hardship. The text is super explicit. It warns against using any spiritual power you gain from these practices for trivial, worldly desires. Can you imagine going through all that just for some fleeting pleasure? The text basically says, who could be more foolish? The goal is way, way higher.
So all of that intense discipline, it's really just preparing a person for the next stage. After perfecting the life of a forest dweller, you might be ready for the final step, sannyāsa. And this is a state of total renunciation, not just of your stuff, but of your entire worldly identity.
This big transition is triggered by a really profound internal shift. It's when the appeal of everything, even the heavenly rewards you might get from rituals, just fades away. When you develop a complete detachment from the results of all your actions, only then is it time to take this final step.
And yeah, this isn't some casual choice you make on a whim. It's a formal, irreversible process. It involves one last ritual where you give away every single possession. You symbolically absorb the sacred fires, meaning that spiritual energy is now carried inside you, and from that moment on, you're completely free from all worldly dependence, and you just wander the earth alone.
Okay, so what does life actually look like for a person who's reached this point? We're now moving away from the external rules and into the internal state, the mindset and the behavior of a truly liberated sage.
And this, right here, just perfectly shows their freedom from materialism. The sum total of their worldly possessions: a simple loincloth, a staff, and a water pot. That's it. This isn't just minimalism, it's a powerful statement of complete non-attachment.
And the text draws a really, really sharp line in the sand here. Just carrying around the external symbols, like a staff, doesn't make you a sage. True renunciation is internal. It's all about controlling your speech with silence, controlling your body by stopping all worldly efforts, and controlling your mind with disciplines like breath control. The outer stuff is totally meaningless without the inner mastery.
Okay, this is where we get to the absolute heart of the philosophy. The text defines bondage and liberation in super clear terms. Bondage is simply your mind being pulled here and there by your senses. Liberation, then, is complete mastery over those exact same senses. It's that simple and that difficult. Now, the behavior of a person like this can seem really strange to the outside world because they are completely free from social conventions. For instance, even though they have this deep wisdom, they might just play with the simple, joyful abandon of a child. And even though they might be super skilled and an expert in all sorts of worldly things, they might act like a fool. And why?
because they have absolutely zero need to prove how smart or capable they are to anyone. Their self-worth just isn't tied to what other people think.
And finally, though they're deeply learned in philosophy and scriptures, they might speak like a madman. Their words can seem all over the place because they're coming from a place that's beyond ordinary logic and social filters. This is what it means to be truly free.
So how do they get this freedom? It all comes down to a massive shift in how they see the world. The text uses this beautiful metaphor. Just like one single moon can be reflected in countless different pots of water, the one supreme soul lives inside every single living being. And when you see that unity everywhere, it changes everything.
And check this out. This shows you exactly what that vision leads to in real life. The sage's mind is completely steady. If they don't get food one day, there's no distress. If some amazing food shows up, there's no big celebration. They see both things as being arranged by a higher power, and they stay perfectly balanced.
All right, this brings us to the home stretch. The big question, why? Why go through this whole arduous path? What is the ultimate goal? The supreme destination that all of this discipline and renunciation is leading to? So the text lays out all these different duties for each stage of life, right? Austerity for the forest dweller, protecting others for the householder, but then it points to this one single thread that connects them all, a universal duty that applies to everyone, always. And as you can see, that's worship of and devotion to the Supreme.
And that is the key takeaway. The path of following your duties, of discipline, of renunciation, it's incredibly powerful, but it only leads to the highest perfection when it's combined with devotion. It's the mix of dedicated action and heartfelt love that unlocks that final door.
And this right here, this is the culmination of the entire journey. Through that unwavering focus and doing your duty, a person starts to literally perceive that divine presence in all beings, just like the moon in all the pots of water. And that perception leads to this state of firm, unbreakable devotion. That's the goal. That's liberation.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? In our world, it's all about constant engagement and external achievement. What can we possibly learn from this ancient path of radical detachment? In an age of nonstop distraction, what can a life of unwavering focus teach us about our own ultimate purpose?
Welcome to this deep dive. We're engaging with a truly extraordinary set of sources today. It's essentially a rigorous, step-by-step blueprint for spiritual liberation, drawn from profound ancient scripture, specifically Canto 11, chapter 18. And this material gives us not just philosophy, but, well, an unvarnished manual detailing what total, uncompromising commitment to the spiritual life actually looked like thousands of years ago.
That's absolutely right. And it's really not abstract theorizing at all. These are highly prescriptive rules. They govern the third and fourth stages of life, what are known as the akshamas. We're talking about the vanaprastha, that's the forest dweller, and then sannyāsa, which is the order of complete renunciation. Our deep dive today, I think our mission really is to decode the incredible intensity of these ancient paths, to understand the philosophical engine driving them, which ultimately connects, prescribed duty or dharma with this ultimate unwavering devotion.
Yeah, and when you look at the sheer effort involved in these stages, it really forces you to pause. I mean, who among us is seriously considering giving up all possessions and subjecting ourselves to 5 fires in the summer? It sounds extreme. Yet even if you listening aren't planning to literally live off wild roofs and sleep on the bare ground, understanding this level of intentional self-control, this detachment, it provides an extraordinary perspective, doesn't it?
It really does.
It shows us the absolute peak of human asceticism, perhaps, and what the ancient masters believed was necessary to achieve, well, freedom.
And the ceiling they were aiming for is just so much higher than most modern self-improvement goals, To approach this system properly, I think we really have to trace the past chronologically. So we'll first unpack the almost unbelievable physical discipline and the external austerities required of the vanaprastha. Then we'll analyze that pivot, the shift towards profound philosophical and mental mastery required for the sannyāsa stage. And finally, and this is really critical, we'll connect the dots to see how this entire very rigid system of dharma ultimately serves only one purpose: to prepare the soul for unconditional devotion to the Supreme.
Okay, let's start there then. Let's begin where the structured renunciation starts, with the forest dweller, the vanaprastha. This stage is meant to commence in the third portion of life, tuja vagam yutan. It's a deliberate withdrawal, isn't it, from the duties of the householder. What defines the entry requirements?
Right. So the transition, which is detailed in verses 1 and 2, really emphasizes immediate and peaceful detachment. The man has reached an age where he begins to prepare for his final years. Now, he has two options regarding his wife. He can either ensure she's placed securely under the care of his adult sons, or he can take her with him. But that's only provided she's willing to follow the same extremely rigorous path. It's not a casual choice.
Right. She has to be on board with the austerity.
Exactly. And the key requirement is that they must reside peacefully in the forest. The text says, Vana ieva vasit chantam. Society, as they knew it, is essentially left behind.
That immediately sets the stage for a whole new economy, if you can even call it that.
Yeah.
The sources seem incredibly strict about how they sustain themselves. It eliminates any reliance on civilization.
Oh, completely. Total self-sufficiency is the mandatory foundation. All sustenance, the text uses the word vatian, must come only from mejie, which means pure forest products. And this isn't hunting or farming, like you said. It's strictly roots, bulbs, and fruits, things you gather.
Just foraging, basically.
Pretty much. And furthermore, the sources prescribe a dress code that is equally radical. It's strictly minimal and natural. They must wear bark, the word is valkala, or woven grass, maybe leaves, or perhaps deerskin, ajnani. It's an immediate symbolic and practical rejection of the entire manufacturing and comfort industry of the human world.
Okay, let's talk about the discipline of the body then. This is where it starts to sound really challenging. The text seems to suggest that the vanaprastha must actively seek out discomfort, or at least systematically reject comfort. What were the specific rules regarding appearance and rest?
Verses 3 and 4 detail this extreme asceticism. Regarding appearance, the forest dweller must voluntarily bear the dirt, malani, of their body. Hair, nails, beard, none of it is to be cut. This serves, well, two functions, really. It rejects vanity, clearly. But it also ensures that the practitioner looks distinct from society, which probably helps prevent casual interaction.
And the specific instructions on water and rest, they seem almost counterintuitive, especially for someone living rough in the wild. You'd think cleanliness and good rest would be important.
Yes, you would think so from a modern perspective. But they are instructed not to bathe excessively or immerse unnecessarily in water absumajeta. This is about controlling the desire for physical purification and comfort, which is often associated with ritual bathing in other contexts. A subtle form of sense control.
Okay. And the rest part?
Regarding rest, the only acceptable bedding is the bare ground. Sankhya. The text goes even further, and it's often interpreted as instructing them to sleep on the ground 3 times daily. Now, this isn't about getting a good nap, it's more likely a way of minimizing the continuity of comfort. It emphasizes a constant state of detachment from physical ease.
So you're constantly interrupting the body's natural cycle of seeking rest and comfort.
Exactly. It prevents settling into any kind of ease.
What's the underlying philosophical mechanism here? Is the goal just to experience pain, or is the text arguing that this extreme tolerance somehow neutralizes our fundamental human dependence on sensory input? What's the payoff?
It's entirely the latter. The goal is purification, tapasya. The body and the mind are deeply connected through the senses, right? So if you can condition the body to endure extremes without complaint, without mental agitation, you effectively strip the senses of their tyrannical power over the mind. The mind can then, theoretically, focus on higher realization without being constantly pulled here and there by physical demands or desires.
Okay, that makes sense. And this leads directly to perhaps the most famous and maybe the most shocking set of rules. The seasonal extremes.
Yes, verse 4. This is where it gets really intense.
Here's where it gets really powerful. The systematic targeting of comfort in every single season. Describe the Panyayinan austerity for us.
Right, these seasonal practices are really the epitome of this kind of dedication. In the scorching summer, Grim, the Vanaprastha, must practice austerity amidst the 5 fires, Panyakayan. This literally means they ignite 4 fires, placed strategically around them, creating intense heat from all horizontal directions. And then the sun blazing overhead serves as the 5th fire. The goal is to willfully endure maximum heat and physical stress without losing focus.
Just sitting there, baking, and then the inversion of that practice for the opposite extremes. It's not just heat they endure.
No, exactly. During the fierce monsoon season, Badasu, the text, instructs them to remain under the torrents of rain, asar jail. So they have to stand exposed, accepting the continuous downpour, just letting it soak them. Wow. And conversely, in the extreme cold of winter, sushya, they must immerse themselves up to the neck, kara, in cold water, enduring the numbing cold for extended periods.
So you've got intense heat, intense rain, intense cold. This triad of seasonal austerity seems like a very systematic effort to break the mind's conditioning to external environmental factors.
That's exactly it. It effectively removes the ability, or at least the mind's reaction, to differentiate between a pleasant experience and an unpleasant one based on external conditions. You aim for a sort of sensory neutrality.
Achieve indifference through endurance. Now, let's look at their continued dependence, or rather lack thereof, on tools and social interaction. How was food even prepared under these conditions? It sounds like they couldn't use much.
The entire lifestyle reinforces absolute self-reliance. While their diet is restricted to gathered forest products, the way they process that food is fascinating. Verse 5 gives details. They can use fire to cook, that's allowed. But if they need to process hard food, like tough roots or nuts, they must pound it either in a mortar or on a stone, basic tools.
Okay, still somewhat standard for simple living.
But here's the detail that truly underscores their commitment. The text also authorizes them to use their own teeth as a processing tool. Tantalukala.
Using their teeth like a mortar.
Essentially, yes. It shows a rejection of even the most rudimentary implements, relying entirely on the body's natural apparatus, its maximum independence from technology, even basic technology.
That is the ultimate dedication to self-sufficiency. And I assume they couldn't possibly accept any help, right, if someone offered them food?
Absolutely not. Verse 6 provides a very unambiguous restriction. The forest dweller must personally collect all necessities for subsistence, vatikaro, everything. And the command is crystal clear. They must not accept anything brought by others. And I think this isn't just about resource management, It's about preventing the subtle development of dependence or gratitude or even the social entanglement that comes with receiving gifts. They've intentionally left that behind.
Right, it maintains that strict boundary. Even their spiritual practice, their sacrifices, had to be completely adapted to this forest environment, didn't they? They couldn't just stop their rituals.
No, their religious duties continue. And that demonstrates that this is still a disciplined stage within the larger Dharma structure. It's not just random wandering. They must still perform Agnihotra, the fire sacrifices, and the traditional moon-related sacrifices like new moon and full moon rites, and the Chaturmasya vows. But the offerings themselves must be made entirely with forest products, things like rice cakes made from gathered grains, karu, purusha.
And there's a specific prohibition, too, right, regarding animals.
Yes, and this is a crucial distinction highlighted in verse 8. They must never use an animal for sacrifice, pashuna, even if such practices were prescribed in other Vedic rituals, Shiralta, for householders, for example. Their severe austerity, their commitment to nonviolence in this stage, seems to supersede any traditional injunctions that involve violence. It aligns their actions with a higher principle of purity.
Okay, so all this effort, this incredible tapasya, this self-denial and endurance, the text says it's directed toward transcending the plane of sages, O Lokat, and ultimately attaining the supreme. But then verse 10 contains this really profound warning, a massive caveat about why all this suffering might actually be wasted.
Yes, this is such a critical philosophical nugget. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source offers a judgment, not on the practice itself, but on the intention behind it. The sage who performs this great difficult austerity, kakratha shuatapa, which the text explicitly states is meant for the highest liberation, nishreya salmahat. But if they use the power or the clarity gained from that austerity merely for insignificant, fleeting sense gratification, kamaya alpiase, well, that person is denounced as the ultimate fool, Lalishi.
Wow. It's like the ancient indictment of spiritual practice being corrupted by petty ambition. You climb this huge mountain of asceticism, endure everything, only to use the purified vision you gain to spot the nearest snack shop, metaphorically speaking.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. The suffering itself is not the reward. The detachment and the realization it yields is the potential reward. If you trade that hard-won realization for some temporary material benefit, no matter how small or seemingly spiritual, you have fundamentally misunderstood the entire purpose of the effort. You've missed the point.
It's a powerful check on motivation.
Absolutely. And finally, the source even provides the methodology for the Vanaprastha's ultimate departure from life, should it come to that.
How so?
Verse 11 addresses the situation. If they become physically incapable of following the rules due to extreme old age and trembling, jarai jadavepatun, they can't maintain the practices. In that case, they are instructed to internalize the sacred fires, essentially placing the external worship within the self, then fix their mind firmly on the Lord, Mixido, and ritualistically enter the fire.
A conscious exit.
Yes, it's presented as a deliberate, conscious, and controlled departure from the material body when the instrument is no longer fit for the practice.
That controlled departure leads us perfectly into the fourth stage, sannyāsa, the completely renounced order. This seems to be the stage of absolute mental mastery, where the focus shifts almost entirely from physical endurance to philosophical realization and inner control. What's the necessary precondition for making this final transition?
The requirement for sannyāsa, which is detailed in verse 12, is absolutely critical. It's complete and unshakable detachment. The word used is viraga. And this is much more than just being, bored with worldly life or feeling a bit down. The seeker must reach a profound philosophical conclusion. They must see even the higher heavenly worlds, svarga, the rewards you might get from good karma, even from the vanaprastha stage itself. They must see even those worlds as ultimately hellish, right, Masu?
Why hellish? Heaven sounds pretty good.
Because of one fundamental flaw: their impermanence. If heaven itself is temporary and achieving it still ultimately necessitates a return to the cycle of birth and death, then from the perspective of seeking absolute final freedom, it's fundamentally useless. It's just a gilded cage.
So the spiritual payoff of the vanaprastha phase, which might lead to these heavenly planes, is now seen as insufficient for the ultimate goal. That is a really powerful philosophical rejection of even celestial temporal rewards.
It is. You have to want out of the entire system, not just a better room within it.
Okay, so once that level of viraga is there, how does the formal renunciation process actually work? How do they sever the ties?
It's a process of total severing, really, defined in verse 13. The applicant must first worship the Supreme. Then, ritualistically, they give all their possessions, sarvasvam, to the officiating priest. Everything.
No holding back?
No holding back anything. Having shed all material connections, they must then absorb the sacred fires into their life air. This symbolizes ending the need for external fire rituals. And through this process, they become utterly free from dependence and nirapeka. Once this internal and external surrender is complete, only then are they authorized to formally enter the sannyasa ashram.
What's fascinating here, and you mentioned this briefly earlier, is that the text recognizes that this pursuit of liberation isn't just about overcoming your own human weakness. It says the demigods themselves actively try to obstruct the process. Why would they do that?
Yes, verse 14 gives us this incredible insight into the sort of cosmic politics, if you will. It explicitly states that even the demigods, devad, attempt to create obstacles for the Brahmin seeking sannyasa. And often, these obstacles manifest subtly, appearing as appeals based on affection from their wife or relatives trying to pull them back.
But why? What threat does a renunciant pose to the demigods?
Because this renunciant is preparing to transcend the entire cycle of action and reaction, the realm of karma, which the demigods largely administer. They're aiming to attain the supreme, which is beyond the jurisdiction and control of even the highest demigods. So the text suggests the demigods are literally attempting to prevent a soul from ascending past their cosmic boundary, from leaving their sphere of influence. It highlights the immense significance of this step.
That really puts the magnitude of the commitment into perspective. It's not just a personal journey, it has cosmic implications. Okay, so once the individual is authorized, they've overcome these obstacles, what is the minimalist lifestyle of the sannyasis supposed to look like? What can they actually possess?
Well, it's about total physical freedom, which necessitates near zero possession. Verse 15 outlines this very clearly. The renunciant, called a muni here, should possess only three things: a loincloth, kalpina, a staff, den, and a water pot, patra. That's literally it.
Loincloth, staff, water pot, nothing else.
Nothing else. They accept nothing else except, the text notes, in an extreme life-threatening emergency, anapati. Otherwise, those three items are the entirety of their worldly goods. And this absolute material detachment extends to every single action, which becomes governed by this crucial concept introduced in verse 16, the four purities.
Ah, yes, the four purities. I think these four rules perfectly encapsulate the necessary shift from the sort of gross external rigor of the vanaprastha to the deep, subtle mindfulness of the sannyasa. How are these purities defined?
They really govern the minute details of conscious living, ensuring that even the most mundane acts become spiritual practices. It's quite profound. First, depita. The action is purified by sight. This specifically means placing the foot only after carefully observing the ground. Why? To ensure no living entity, not even an insect, is harmed. It's constant awareness and nonviolence.
Okay, purified by sight. What's next?
Second, vastraputta. The water is purified by cloth. This means they should only drink water that has been filtered through a piece of cloth. Again, the purpose is to ensure no small creatures or gross impurities are consumed, maintaining both physical purity and, more importantly, nonviolence.
Purified by cloths. The third.
Third, satyaputta. Speech is purified by truth. This is crucial. They should only speak words that have been rigorously vetted for truthfulness and, implicitly, necessity. No idle talk, no falsehoods.
Purified by truth. And the last one.
Fourth, manapittai. The act is purified by the mind. This is perhaps the most encompassing. They should act only with a completely purified, focused mind, eliminating impulse, agitation, anger, greed, or any form of attachment from the motivation behind the action.
Sight, cloth, truth, mind. It covers movement, intake, communication, and intention. That's incredibly comprehensive.
It really is. Every moment becomes an opportunity for mindfulness and purification.
Now, the sannyasi is famously identified by the triple staff, the tridayam. But the text immediately moves to counter the idea that just carrying the staff is enough. It details the true rods of control. This seems like a really important clarification.
Oh, it's perhaps one of the most important corrections the source makes, addressing the potential for ritualism to overshadow the substance. Verse 17 addresses Uddhava directly on this point. The text warns that merely carrying the external bamboo rods does not make one a true renunciant, a true yatiya. The physical staff is only an external symbol. It represents control over body, speech, and mind. But the real controlling rods, the done that matter, are internal disciplines that must be actively mastered.
And what are these internal rods?
There are three. First, mana, or silence, for speech. And this isn't just, not talking. It's mastering the impulse to speak unnecessarily, untruthfully, or harmfully. True control over the faculty of speech. Second, aniha, or non-endeavor, for the body. This means non-attachment to the results of action. It implies minimizing unnecessary physical activity and, more deeply, detaching from the idea that I am the doer of actions. And third, anilayama, which means breath regulation, for the mind or consciousness. This is often linked to pradema practices. It's presented as the direct tool for stabilizing and controlling the otherwise turbulent, restless mind.
Silence for speech, non-endeavor for body, breath control for mind. That clarifies the ultimate goal so well. The external structure, the staff, the rules, they're just scaffolding. The real spiritual structure is built entirely on this internal control.
Precisely. The symbol points to the substance, but it's the substance that liberates.
So the true test of this internal control must surely come from how the sannyasi interacts with the world just enough to survive, specifically how they procure food without developing dependence or attachment. What are the rules for begging? They can't just take whatever they want.
No, the rules for begging are very carefully designed to prevent attachment, expectation, and any sense of entitlement. Verse 18 lays this out. The sannyasi must beg among all four social orders, the vrtyas, showing impartiality. However, they must specifically avoid any houses associated with blameworthy or sinful persons. There's still a discernment required.
Okay, beg from anyone respectable. Is there a limit?
Yes, and this is crucial. They must limit their begging to a maximum of 7 houses, sata agaran, no more than 7. And perhaps even more importantly, this must be done completely without prior arrangement, asakalpta. They can't pre-plan which houses look promising or tell people they're coming tomorrow. It has to be spontaneous.
To prevent expectation or obligation building up.
Exactly. And the core mandate, the attitude they must maintain, is acceptance. They must be satisfied with whatever little is obtained, tuyel labdina tavata. Whether they get a feast or a crumb or nothing, their mental state should remain undisturbed.
And the ritual of eating itself seems designed to transform the food from a potential source of pleasure into just functional fuel.
That's a very good way to put it. Verse 19 mandates the procedure after collecting the alms. The sannyasi must go to a water reservoir outside the village or town. There, they purify themselves ritually by akamana, touching water to specific points. Then, importantly, they must restrain speech during the meal, no chatting while eating. They must also sanctify the collected alms, usually by mentally or physically dividing a portion as an offering, acknowledging the source, and then they must eat the remaining portion completely. No waste, but also no savoring or picking favorites.
So the whole process is ritualized, detached, mindful. It actively prevents any sense of self-indulgence or developing preferences for certain kinds of food.
Yes, it reinforces the idea that the body is just being maintained, not indulged.
All of this intense austerity, both physical and mental, points towards the ultimate inner state, which is described beautifully in verse 20 as the self-possessed wanderer. What are the defining characteristics of this internal state? What does it feel like to be that yati?
The ideal yati, the successful renunciant, must wander alone, ekashkere, moving freely on the earth, entirely unburdened by attachments either to places or people. Their senses are fully controlled. And the text gives these key attributes that define the successful outcome of the sannyāsa stage. They must be atmakrit, meaning delighting in the self, finding joy internally, not externally. They must be atmarata, rejoicing in the self, content within. They are self-possessed, atmavan, meaning stable and centered in their true identity. And crucially, they possess equal vision, samadashana. They see all beings and situations with an equal eye.
And where does this equal vision come from? How do they achieve that?
It stems directly from their core spiritual realization, mentioned in verse 21. They seek seclusion and peace, fixing a pure mind, vishuddhaccheta, on the Supreme. And in that state, they contemplate the individual self, the Atmanam, as being one with the Supreme Soul, specifically without distinction. The text says, apina maya, contemplating the self as non-different from me, Krishna, the speaker.
Ah, so the non-difference, the realization of unity is the root of the equal vision.
Exactly. If everything is fundamentally connected to the same Supreme Source, how can you maintain artificial distinctions or preferences?
This contemplative stage is also where the huge concepts of bondage and liberation become astonishingly simple. They're defined not by external factors like being in a forest or a palace, but purely by internal management.
Philosophically, it's presented as very clear-cut, yes. Verse 22 states that the sage must discern this difference with steady knowledge, jananiyahaya. And the definition of bondage, bandham, is simply the distraction of the senses, indriyavikapa. It's the outward pull of the external world, the mind chasing sense objects. That's bondage. Conversely, liberation, moksha, is nothing more and nothing less than the control of those senses, sayamana, bringing the senses and by extension the mind under control.
So the entire gulf between being trapped in the cycle of birth and death and being liberated is just the level of mastery over your own mind and senses.
According to this text, yes. The locus of control, and therefore the locus of liberation, is entirely internal.
And achieving that control requires fighting what the text identifies quite vividly as the six enemies, the afvarga. Could you detail these internal obstacles for us? These seem universal.
They are indeed universal psychological impediments. This is really the practical core of self-mastery that the sannyāsa practices facilitate. The six enemies, the afvarga, are lust, anger, greed, illusion or delusion, pride or madness intoxication, and envy.
Lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, envy. The classics.
The classics, exactly. The anaprasa phase helps starve the senses of external fuel for these enemies. The sannyāsa phase is about recognizing and annihilating these internal impulses directly through knowledge, detachment, and focus on the self. And verse 23 confirms that by controlling these six enemies, the sage effectively renounces petty, material desires, kudrakamevyo, and attains the great enduring happiness, mahatsukam, that is found solely within the self, by connecting with the Supreme.
So the entire structure of these two extremely demanding ashramas seems designed, ultimately, to clear the internal battlefield for this final, crucial confrontation with the afvarga.
That's a very accurate way to see it. You remove the external distractions and supports for the ego, so you can finally deal with its root manifestations directly.
Okay, this brings us to part 3, focusing on the liberated state itself and the universal principles that emerge. We move now to the state of true liberation, where the sage, having achieved that control over senses and mind, seems to transcend the very foundation of the visible world we all experience. This section, starting around verse 26, seems to fundamentally challenge the nature of reality itself.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Having established that internal mastery leads to freedom, the external world, the one perceived by the senses, necessarily loses its solidity, its ultimate importance. Verses 26 and 27 deliver this essential philosophical conclusion. The sources state quite clearly that the visible world, the shamanam, should not be accepted as ultimate reality, vastutaya. Why? Because it fundamentally perishes, minashati. Its nature is transient.
If something is temporary, it cannot be the ultimate truth. That's the logic.
That's the core logic, yes. If it comes and goes, it's not the final reality.
But the world is obviously here. We perceive it, we interact with it. So what is the nature of this illusion, the maya, that the sources describe. It's not saying nothing exists, right?
Right, that's a common misconception. The source clarifies the mechanism. This universe, which it says is composed of mind, speech, and life air, prana. The subtle elements of experience is understood through logic, tarketa, as mere illusion, maya. It's important to grasp that maya here doesn't mean the world doesn't exist at all, like a hallucination. It means it exists only temporarily and independently, much like a dream exists only relative to the sleeping consciousness.
Yeah.
It lacks ultimate independent substance.
It's real in a relative sense, but not an absolute one.
Precisely. Therefore, the steady-minded sage, understanding this ephemeral nature, gives up intentional, results-oriented activities, sikatats, activities aimed at gaining something within this temporary framework, whether for this life or the next heavenly life. Having understood the illusory nature of the game, they stop trying to win points within it. And the text adds, they should not remember it again, meaning they should let go of the mental attachment to these fleeting perceptions and goals.
This profound shift in understanding means they also shed the very rules and structures that once guided them, right? The Uddhava system, which was the blueprint for getting here, must itself be abandoned once liberation is effectively achieved.
Absolutely. You don't keep climbing the ladder once you're on the roof. Verse 28 confirms this explicitly. One who is fixed in knowledge, jnana-niho, or completely detached, virakto, or deeply devoted, medbhakto, or even just indifferent, adapekaunpi, to the world, such a person should abandon the external symbols of the ashmas. That means the staff, the specific dress code, the rigid rules. They should wander beyond the jurisdiction of ordinary rules and regulations of Vidigokara. Their internal reality has superseded the need for external ritual or structure.
Okay, but this raises a really important practical question. If they are beyond rules, how does the wise person, the Buddha, actually behave when they are in society? If they're operating with this complete internal freedom, how do they engage with people who are still very much operating by social conventions and rules? It could seem chaotic.
That's a very practical concern, and the sources provide a fascinating and perhaps somewhat paradoxical guide to this conduct in verse 29. The wise person often acts in ways that deliberately deflect social scrutiny and expectation. This behavior ensures they are not trapped again by attachment or aversion or the burden of being seen as a holy man.
Okay, give us the specifics of that behavior. It sounds intriguing. How might they act?
Well, the text says they might play like a child, balakavat krut, meaning spontaneous, unconcerned with adult conventions or dignity, just natural. Or they may act like a fool, jadavat karat, even though they are actually an expert, kushala. They might deliberately hide their knowledge or capabilities to avoid drawing attention or being burdened with requests or expectations.
Playing dumb, basically.
Essentially, yes. Or they might even speak like a madman, unmadavat veded, even though they are profoundly learned, vidvan. Saying things that seem nonsensical or disconnected to throw people off the scent, perhaps.
So these are almost like social camouflage tactics to protect their inner freedom.
You could see it that way. There are safeguards, allowing them to move through society without being captured again by the very expectations and roles they've transcended. However, there's a critical caveat added. When they are actively among people, gokarya, perhaps when begging or interacting where necessary, and the situation requires maintaining social harmony, they must still behave according to proper Vedic conduct, nagamashteri.
So the internal freedom doesn't translate into reckless disregard for others or social chaos. There's a situational awareness and responsibility involved.
Exactly. It's not about being disruptive. It's about being free internally while navigating the external world appropriately when needed.
Now, I see the source includes a specific warning in verse 30 about certain intellectual pitfalls, things like dry debates and speculation. Why is intellectual engagement identified as a potential spiritual trap, even for a realized sage? Wouldn't they be good at arguing?
That's a great question. This warning targets the potential resurgence of intellectual pride, which is, of course, one of the 6 enemies, pride illusion. Even after realization, the ego can try to reassert itself through intellect. So the sage should not be absorbed in dry Vedic arguments, Vedavadaratat. Knowledge must lead to and support realization, not just endless rhetoric or showing off learning. Furthermore, they must not be hypocritical, pucking claiming realization they don't fully embody. Nor should they be merely speculative or atheistic, haituku, relying only on materialistic logic.
And the key point about debates.
The most important instruction here is about maintaining neutrality in discourse. They must never take sides, come to samarjat in useless, dry debates, shukavada vivade. Engaging in partisan squabbling just wastes energy and feeds the ego. Their focus remains on the realized truth, not on convincing others through argument.
That commitment to neutrality seems to extend beyond just debates, into their fundamental interaction with all living entities. The sage must operate with total peacefulness, right?
Absolutely. Verse 31 emphasizes this. The sober sage, the Dhya, maintains a state of radical non-disturbance and non-aggression. They should neither be disturbed by people, regardless of how others act, nor should they disturb others. This implies profound inner stability and peace. They must actively tolerate harsh words, ativaranti dikaita. Just let them pass without reaction. And equally, they should never disrespect anyone, navameta panyakana.
And there's a final warning about creating enmity based on the body.
Yes, the text provides a final, quite damning comparison. It warns against creating enmity with anyone based merely on the fleeting physical body, comparing this limited body-based identification and conflict to the behavior of animals, pashuvat. It's seen as a lower, unenlightened mode of interaction.
So what does this all boil down to? What unifying metaphysical truth allows the sage to maintain this profound level of acceptance, this non-enmity, even when insulted or challenged or facing hardship? There must be a core realization underpinning this behavior.
Yes, and it all connects back beautifully to that core realization of unity, which is highlighted again and very poetically in verse 32. The teaching is that the Supreme Soul, Paratma, is single and situated equally within all beings. It's the one consciousness pervading everything. And to make this potentially abstract concept relatable, the Source uses this wonderful analogy. It's like the single moon, Indu, reflecting simultaneously in countless different water pots, Uddapatri.
Ah, the moon in the water pots. So many reflections, but only one moon.
Exactly. Just as the moon remains one single essence despite its countless varied reflections, all living entities, despite their different bodies and minds, are ultimately of one single spiritual essence. Ekapakanikala. Once the sage deeply realizes and experiences that the same ultimate consciousness resides within their own heart, as resides within the heart of the person insulting them, or the person praising them, or the animal walking by, well, the very idea of disrespect, enmity, or even strong preference becomes fundamentally illogical, doesn't it?
It dissolves the basis for conflict and partiality. That realization of unity must also be what drives the sage's complete indifference to their own material circumstances, even when it comes to the basic necessity of food, which we touched on earlier.
Precisely. Verse 33 connects this directly. The steady person, Ditaman, the one who is fortified by this knowledge, does not lament when food is not obtained, nor does he rejoice when it is. There's an equanimity.
Why? What's the understanding?
Because he understands that both conditions, getting food easily or not getting it, are controlled entirely by destiny, by higher arrangements. The word used is devatantritam, orchestrated by the divine or by cosmic law. His own effort is minimal, his attachment is nil, so the result doesn't cause agitation. His pursuit of food, as laid out in verse 34, is therefore purely functional.
And what is that function again? Just survival?
Just enough to survive, yes. Endeavor for food only as much as is appropriate to sustain life. Contra the tome. The body is viewed purely as a vessel, an instrument. And sustaining life, keeping the instrument functional, is necessary only because it allows for the continuation of the contemplation of truth, Patama. It's the contemplation of truth, which is the direct path leading to ultimate liberation.
So the physical existence is basically just fuel for the philosophical journey. Keep the engine running so the journey can continue.
That's perspective, yes. And therefore, as verse 35 concludes this section, the sage accepts, without preference, whatever food comes their way, whether it's considered superior or inferior by worldly standards. Same for clothing or bedding. Whatever is obtained by chance, yadachai, is accepted with equanimity.
This detachment is total. But the text doesn't just leave people there. It acknowledges that maybe someone reaches this stage of detachment but hasn't fully realized the ultimate goal yet. What happens then? Verses 38 and 39 seem crucial here.
Yes, this is a very practical point. What if someone becomes self-controlled, atmavan, and detached from the misery that comes from sense pleasures, but they haven't yet fully realized the ultimate dharma, which is identified here as devotional service? They're detached, but maybe not fully connected yet. In that case, the instruction is clear. They must approach a bona fide guru, a spiritual master, a wise sage.
And what should their attitude be?
They must serve the guru faithfully, with great respect, and importantly, without envy. They should continue this service until they realize Brahman, the absolute truth, and honor the Supreme Lord as the ultimate guru situated within the heart of their external guru and within themselves. So guidance is still essential if full realization isn't present despite detachment.
That makes sense. It provides a path forward even from detachment. But then immediately after stressing the importance of a guru and genuine practice, the text issues a very strong warning against the hypocrite, the false renunciant. This seems like a recurring concern.
It is. Verses 40 and 41 deliver this stern warning. It describes someone who is uncontrolled over those 6 enemies we discussed: lust, anger, greed, etc. Their senses are still violent and demanding. They are devoid of real knowledge, ajnana, and detachment, viraga, yet they still adopt the external symbols of renunciation, specifically living upon the triple staff, tridentум, of sannyāsa.
So they look the part, but the inner reality is missing.
Exactly. And the text does not mince words about such a person. It says this person is a destroyer of Dharma. They make a mockery of the principles. They effectively deny the demigods by misusing the system they uphold. They deny their own soul by ignoring its true nature. And they deny the Supreme Lord situated within the soul. The text uses a striking phrase. Their impurities are not yet matured or cooked out, avipakvakayo. They haven't done the work.
And the consequence for this hypocrisy, it sounds severe.
It is. The consequence is that they fall away from both this world, because they've nominally renounced its duties and pleasures, and the next, because their sham renunciation earns them no spiritual merit, likely incurring negative reactions instead. They lose out on both fronts. It's a total failure.
That's a chilling warning against spiritual pretense. It underscores the absolute necessity of inner substance matching the outer form.
Absolutely. Integrity is paramount.
Okay, this brings us towards the conclusion, the supreme synthesis in Part 4. We've charted the course from the extreme physical rigor of the forest dweller through the mental and philosophical transcendence of the renunciant, culminating in the realization of unity and the warnings against hypocrisy. Before synthesizing the final conclusion, the source provides a necessary recap, doesn't it? A summary of the essential duties, the dharmas, specific to each stage of life.
Yes, this recap in verses 42 and 43 is crucial. It serves to remind us that structured duty, dharma, is the foundational platform upon which liberation is built, even if duty itself is not the ultimate destination. It grounds the discussion. So, it briefly restates, the renunciant's primary duty is internal control of the mind, shema, nonviolence, ahisa, austerity, tapas, and philosophical discrimination. The forest dweller's main focus is external austerity, tapas. The householder's duty involves protecting other beings, performing worship and sacrifice, iche, and regulated family life. And the student's prime duty is service to the guru.
So it acknowledges the specific roles, but then the text immediately extracts the universal principles from the duties that apply to everyone, regardless of their particular stage or social position. What are those common threads that bind all stages together?
These are the ethical and personal qualities seen as essential for any spiritual aspirant, listed in verse 43. They include celibacy, or regulated sexuality for householders, austerity, appropriate to one's stage, cleanliness, internal and external, contentment, and friendliness toward all beings, buddhasanam. These 5 seem to form the universal moral code, the baseline for civilized spiritual life.
Celibacy, austerity, cleanliness, contentment, friendliness.
Okay. But then the verse adds the most important element, the one that acts as the linchpin, uniting every stage and giving it ultimate purpose, madhupasanam. Worship of me, meaning worship of the Supreme Lord. This is presented as the universal, overarching duty for all.
So devotion enters here as the universal requirement. Okay, let's unpack this final formula for supreme perfection then. It seems the entire complex, rigid, ancient structure, this whole Varashrama system with all its intense rules, is ultimately presented as merely the engine designed to power one final crucial action, devotion or bhakti.
That is absolutely the ultimate conclusion of this entire chapter, this deep dive. The sources, particularly in verses 44 through 47, explain the synthesis very clearly. It states that the person who worships the Supreme Lord always, with undivided attention, ananyabhak, specifically through the dedicated performance of their own prescribed duties, svadharmika, that person perceives the divine presence in all beings. And through this process, duty performed with devotion, they attain firm devotion, bhakti lahate param.
So it's not duty or our devotion, it's duty leading to devotion.
Exactly. And verse 47 has this key phrase, proper conduct according to one's duty, akarala kampanda, when united with devotion, madbhakti yuto. That combination alone bestows the highest perfection and is supreme. Vishya sakarapara. The duty itself, the dharma, is preparatory. It acts as a purification process. The phrase used is sadharmanirita sattva, one whose existence has been cleansed or purified by performing their svadharma. It prepares the mind, clarifies the consciousness.
Okay, so if the dharma, the duty, the austerity, provides the purification and perhaps the knowledge, what does the devotion, the bhakti, provide that the austerity and knowledge alone cannot? Why is devotion the final step?
That's the core question. The austerity and duty, performed correctly, provide the purification, the detachment, the knowledge, the realization, vijnana, the ability to see the truth, to understand the difference between matter and spirit, self and non-self. But the final ascent, the actual attainment of the Supreme Lord, the Brahman, the cause of all creation that, according to verse 45, is granted specifically by unflinching devotion, bhakti manapayani.
So austerity and knowledge get you to the door, maybe even show you the keyhole, but devotion is the key that actually unlocks the door and lets you enter.
That's a very fitting analogy. Austerity clears the path, knowledge shows the destination, but devotion, the loving connection, is what actually draws the soul to the Supreme and allows for that ultimate union. As verse 46 says, when the soul is purified by svadharma and endowed with this knowledge and realization, through devotion, they very soon attain the Supreme. Maisa inyasa apyeti. Quickly they come to me.
This shift from the almost unbelievable rigor of the vanaprastha to this state of unconditional love and devotion is quite profound. It almost reframes the entire purpose of the earlier stages. It means that the point of conquering the 5 fires and sleeping on the bare earth wasn't primarily to boast of your incredible endurance, but maybe just to purify and soften the heart enough, to remove the ego's grip, so that genuine devotion could finally take root.
Exactly. That's the perfect synthesis. The intense rules of the vanaprastha and the mental discipline of the sannyāsa are incredibly sophisticated methods designed to cultivate complete non-attachment. They aim to strip away the layers of worldly identification and desire so thoroughly that nothing remains but the purified self, ready and eager to connect with the Supreme Soul. And that Supreme Soul, as the text emphasizes, is the very essence of all beings, the single source reflected everywhere, like that moon in the countless water pots. The ultimate goal is the love and the unity realized through this purified devotional state.
That is a stunning synthesis, connecting the dots from extreme rules to ultimate love. And that brings us to our final thought, something for you, our listeners, to carry forward from this deep dive. We spent a good amount of time detailing those 6 internal enemies: lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and envy, identifying them as the absolute barriers to true renunciation according to this source. Now, the sources included that very strong warning back in verse 40 describing the hypocrite. The person who is uncontrolled over those 6 internal enemies, yet still lives upon the external symbols, like the triple staff, claiming the status of a renunciant. The text says this person is a destroyer of dharma. Their impurities are not yet matured, avipakvakayo. And remember the consequence for this inner failure. They fall away from both this world and the next, a total loss. So, here's the thought. If merely carrying the external symbols of the highest spiritual path while failing internally against those 6 enemies leads to such a catastrophic fall from both material and transcendental pursuits, what does that say about the critical importance of our own inner integrity? Our own struggle with those same 6 enemies may be in less dramatic forms when we pursue any form of self-improvement, professional goal, or even seemingly modest spiritual practice in our modern complex lives. How crucial is that inner authenticity? That's something for you to mull on until our next deep dive.